Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about the changing nature of work. I am Susie Jackson. I'm a news editor at LinkedIn, coming to you live from my home in New York City. Today on the show, we're going to talk about what you have been up to in the kitchen since the pandemic began and what it means for the businesses who bring you the food that you're cooking, the tools that you're using, the inspiration that you're finding, the techniques you're picking up. The industry is booming. We have seen your pictures of your sourdough bread loaves. We've seen your pictures of banana breads online. Some people are saying they've seen enough loaves of bread, enough photos of the foods that we are cooking while we've been in lockdown and now are slowly starting to reopen. We have been in the kitchen a lot. Searches for online cooking classes have surged. Chefs are taking over social feeds. Cookbooks are topping bestseller lists. When restaurants abruptly closed, this drastic swing to home cooking was obvious. What was less obvious, though, were some of the changes that had to happen behind the scenes to make it possible. We saw panic shopping, we saw supply chains jam up, we saw demand spike on unexpected goods. Businesses have had a really hard time adapting to this, but they're figuring it out. And we're going to talk with some of them on the show today. But first, I want to hear from you. We come together as a community here on this show. What have you been up to in the kitchen? Were you already a gourmet chef? Have you had to panic and get a crash course in feeding yourself during the last few months? Will any of the new habits that you're falling into stick around once life starts to return more to normal, whenever that is? Let me know in the comments. Talk to me, talk to each other. We're going to get to as many of your comments, questions, and insights as we can today. On the show, we will be talking to three great guests about this shift to cooking in the home. Later in the show, we're going to hear from Louis Razzo, who is talking about pivoting his family's 100-year-old fish wholesaling business in New York City to a retail operation. We'll also hear from Chad Monroe, who is the co-founder and CEO of Jupiter, an automated grocery app out of the Bay Area. His company only about a year old, so companies young and old talking about how they're adapting to this pandemic. But first, I want to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing for home cooks. And to do that, I want to bring out my first guest. Monica Burton is an editor at eater.com. Monica, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Normally, Eater covers restaurants and the celebration of dining, and clearly that's been a place with not a lot going on in the last few months. I'm curious, the site launched a whole section dedicated to home cooking called Eater at Home. How would you categorize the types of home cooks you're seeing emerge in this time?
Yeah, so we launched Eater at Home way back in March as a way to really bring dining culture to our readers at home and explore what it means to eat at home right now when restaurants are closed. And in covering this, we've seen there are two categories of cooks out there. There are the project cookers who want to get into sourdough. They want to make pasta, and they are using this time now that they have more time to get into cooking in a way that maybe they weren't before. But then there are the people that just really miss restaurants and maybe weren't cooking for themselves as much and just want to make good food for themselves now that restaurants are closed and need to figure out how to do that. And we're trying to speak to both those audiences with our content. And then we also have an event component to Eater at Home where we really bring restaurant culture to our readers with chef demos and chef pantry tours. And so they're getting a little bit of a taste of the old Eater at Eater at Home through these chef events.
That's great. I want to welcome some viewers to the stream who are joining us. Midori says, hello, I'm cooking way more at home and trying a new variety of foods too. Tamara says that she'll be glad to get some new recipes. Maybe we'll hear some of those from our guests throughout the show today. Monica, you're talking about seeing people kind of bifurcate into project cooks and people kind of just trying to get by. I'm curious, for those of you joining us in the stream, do you feel like you fall into one of these categories? Let us know, and we'll try to gather up some of those comments and see where you're at. And Monica, for the people just trying to get by who maybe open the pantry and it's bare, what are some of the biggest needs that you're seeing and trying to meet and helping those folks kind of level up their skills?
Yeah, I think, like you said, people are really looking to figure out how to stock their pantries in a way that will make it easier for them to cook at home. So they want to know what spices they need, what pantry ingredients will make it easy to throw together a dinner, what condiments will make the food that they do make taste even better. And they're also interested in like the little hacks that make spending every meal at home easier, like the best way to reheat pizza, how to freeze bagels or repurpose takeout, or even what instant noodles they should buy. There are a whole lot out there, and we have a guide to that even.
And I think the guides have been pretty popular. I know that if we're talking about home cooks who don't even have spices, they maybe not have the right tools either. What kind of things do you think that the home cook should have if they're just getting into this and need to get started?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously need the basic pots and pans. We've also talked a lot about what eater editors are using at home to make cooking easier, and those can cover little things like one of my favorite things we've written about is a bench scraper that is also great for cleaning out pots, cleaning out the sink. Um, so we have guides to like how to at the most basic level stock your kitchen when it comes to tools. And then there are also the tools for the project cookers, like ice cream makers, pasta makers. I think those are also really popular right now.
Yeah, I think online sales of things like that have been surging. That's not something expected, ice cream maker, bread maker. It's kind of interesting to see those things flying off the shelves, whereas before it might have been a Father's Day gift or something. Tell me, restaurants are starting to reopen. Do you think that people are going to keep cooking at home at the same increased level, even as that change comes back to us?
I think they'll have to. I think even though restaurants are reopening, it's by no means a back to normal situation. Um, it's maybe not safe to eat out at the level we once did if we were frequent restaurant goers, and it might get more expensive as restaurants have to make sure everything is safe. So I think people will continue to cook. But that said, there's no replacing the experience of dining out at a restaurant, and I know I'm eager to get back to that.
Yeah, and we've got folks in the stream talking to us about their cooking habits now. Chioke says, I've been cooking so much, I didn't even know I knew how to cook that well. So maybe started off as a basic, maybe moving into the project cooking zone. Kayla says, I love that I get to cook more. Chris says home cooking is still dominant, but also still orders 3 times a week, which is a change for that family, preferring ordering on the restaurant's website or an app to pick it up. Monica, we've talked about some of the trends. We've jokingly talked about sourdough and banana bread. What are some of the other things that you're seeing in terms of trends?
I think baking in general is a huge trend, not just sourdough, but making cakes, making, like you said, banana bread, cupcakes, cookies. I know there was a flour shortage at the start of this, and we actually just published a really great piece on the King Arthur Flour Hotline, which has seen an unprecedented amount of calls during this time because people are really looking for that comfort that baked goods can bring. And it's also something to do. And then I've seen a lot of trends that are driven by Instagram, sourdough included, obviously, but then there was the DeLonga coffee, focaccia that's beautifully decorated with vegetables, even just growing scallion on your windowsill. I think Instagram has really emerged as a way for people to do things together while they're apart and connect.
So still finding ways to find comfort and community through food, even as we're apart. Monica, thank you for bringing us those insights. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And keep letting us know in the comments. Are you the project cooker? Are you just trying to scrape by? I want to thank Monica Burton from eater.com. And we've heard from her about how coronavirus has changed the way we cook. And now I want to shift to the way it's shaping the industry that's bringing us that food. To do that, I want to welcome my next guest. Louis Razzo is the fourth generation owner of fish wholesaler F. Razzo and Sons in New York City. Louis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Your fish wholesaling business has been in your family for over 100 years, and you serve some of New York City's finest clubs and restaurants and hotels, like the best, like multiple Michelin star places. Obviously, those places have been shut down in the last month. I'm curious, when did you know your business was going to be impacted, and what did you do to respond?
I think when they closed the Broadway theaters is when I suddenly realized that my business was going to be seriously compromised. And not long after they closed the theaters, they closed the restaurants. And, my business is selling the restaurants, the hotels, and the clubs. So I went from making 250 deliveries a day to zero, which was obviously concerning. So I had to figure out something else to do, something to keep me busy. And we decided to open up a retail store in a building that I own, which is located in Chelsea between 19th and 20th Street.
And what's that like? You're a wholesaler. You've been a wholesaler your entire career. That's been in your family for 100 years. You're not used to interfacing with the public, and to make that switch so quickly. Tell us what that was like for you and for
It's
your
been
staff.
phenomenal. It's been just a wonderful experience. So many people are buying fish and bringing, their cell phones and showing me the pictures of what they created. People are so excited to get the fish that we offer because we're offering such fresh fish that we would normally sell people like La Bernardine or Danielle's or Monroe or the Four Seasons Hotel. We're offering, the seafood to them at reasonable prices. And my first thought really was to be able to sell seafood to Chelsea at reasonable prices. And we've exploded beyond Chelsea. We have people from the East Side coming, people from Queens, people from Brooklyn. We've gotten some great press. But mostly, I think we're putting out a great product, and I think we're doing it reasonably. And people are excited to cook with fish that they normally wouldn't, I think.
Yeah, tell me more about that. So fish is something that can be intimidating for some home cooks, but you're telling me you're actually seeing them buy things that you feel are unusual, that maybe
Uh,
you're more often
Absolutely.
at a fancy restaurant.
Things like local John Dory, things like fresh pupo that I bring in from Greece. I brought in an opa from Hawaii the other day and sold. I bought a 110-pound fish and sold it out in less than an hour. People are excited to try different things. They're excited to Google how to cook it. And the fascinating part of it is when they bring me the pictures of what they did with the fish. I think people would normally cook less fish. I think they'd rather eat fish out in a restaurant. I think it carries a stigma of an odor. If people are cooking it at home, the seafood odor would linger. But people are excited to try different things, and they've been trying all kinds of fish that I've been bringing in. It's been really awesome.
And it sounds like it's actually a really fun community experience, as much fun as any of us can have.
Yeah,
Tell me more about it.
we've developed a great relationship with the neighborhood. They're all afraid that we're going to close up when my wholesale begins again. I've kind of promised them that I wouldn't, and I would keep the retail store there. In fact, we're thinking about applying for a liquor license and putting a bar in the back and a retail fish store out front. And I know I have the support of the neighborhood. I mean, they come by every day. We have the same people coming by almost every day. And there's a lot of love in Chelsea for our business. It makes me unbelievably happy.
That's really nice. Tell me about your staff too. These are guys who they're not salespeople, they're not in retail. What's it been like for them to make this change? How have you
I
managed?
think they've enjoyed it because we're very busy normally during the year in the wholesale. And so, I mean, there's a lot of head down getting the job done. And I have a crew of 8 guys, and I have guys that all turn into salespeople. They all have enjoyed the compatibility with the customers, and we have a fun atmosphere. We're joking. We have music going on. The people coming in seem to be so happy. So it's been a nice experience, and I've enjoyed the fillet guys, my workers normally in the wholesale department, coming into a retail situation and really doing a great job. I'm proud of them.
That's great to hear that they're part of the fun too, that it hasn't been too much of a jarring change for them. It sounds great. I mean, I'm in New York. I'm looking forward to come seeing you over there.
I would expect you. I would like you to come by. Yeah.
I'm wondering though, this sounds wonderful, but is it enough to actually help your business float through this time?
No, I mean it's a financial hardship. I mean, I have 9 trucks just sitting in my parking lot, anchored, and I'm still having to pay for the trucks. You have to pay for rent. I'm trying to pay for all of the medical. I pay for my employees' medical plan, and still have to do that. So I have a lot of bills that I have to pay with really no money coming in. A lot of the restaurants have closed for 3 months, and along with that, they haven't been sending me many checks. So it's been difficult. And what the retail does doesn't come close to the volume that my wholesale company did. So, it's rewarding emotionally, but it's got a long way to go before it can cover the cost of my wholesale business.
Yeah, it's been a really, really tough time for restaurants. And as you're letting us see, that's a real ecosystem here. You're supplying them. You're going to the market at 2 a.m. and buying fish from those guys. So it's like it goes both ways, down to customers, but back up through the chain as well. I'm curious, given your intimate relationship with all of these really high-end places in the city, What do you see going forward for the restaurant industry as the year progresses?
I think what I'm looking at, I mean, I do a lot of business with a lot of clubs in New York. I sell the New York Athletic Club, University Club, Harvard Club, Princeton Club. I sell a large amount of clubs. I think they're not going to open until August, or for the most part, a good portion of them. And that's a lot of business I'll lose. I think a lot of the big restaurants I sell, like La Bernardine and Danielle's and Maria, I think they're not going to open until they can have full capacity, is a sense I'm getting from the chefs that I speak to. I think the smaller restaurants in New York City are the restaurants that are opening now, that are offering outdoor seating. But the real big restaurants like Ocean Prime, I don't think they're going to open. I know they're not going to open up with this outdoor seating phase. And I'm hoping they'll open up when they get to the 50% phase. But I'm kind of thinking that they're going to wait until you're able to go 100% capacity.
Yeah, we're all going to be watching that closely as we're talking about the ecosystem that those restaurants are a piece of, and how your business is one of those too. Some comments in the stream. Deborah says, "You're amazing. That's so kind-hearted of you." I'm not sure if Deborah is talking about having a pop-up or still paying health insurance for your employees, but getting some love from Deborah. Also,
Thank you, Deborah.
Francis and Darcy, thank you for joining us. Louis, thank you so much for telling us about how you've changed your 100-year-old business, never been in retail before, and now you have this thriving community hub. It's not covering the bills for now, but I love to hear the spirit that it's been great and you want to keep it going. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. The people of Chelsea have been awesome. They've been strong throughout the virus. They've been optimistic, and it's been a wonderful experience.
I'm glad to hear that. I've had to hear some silver lining in the midst of a really tough time. Louis, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That was Louis Razzo, owner of F. Razzo and Sons, a 100-year-old business wholesaling fish to the finest places in New York City, now switching to retail. For the next segment, I want to talk to a business that's a bit younger and a bit of a different game. Chad Monroe is the co-founder of the automated grocery service, Jupiter. Chad, welcome to Business Unusual.
Thank you for having me.
So you are out in San Francisco. I want to hear, I know Jupiter is just available in the Bay Area right now. So for those of us who aren't there, you have about 800,000 subscribers. I want to hear, what is Jupiter and where do you hope it goes?
Yeah, for sure. So we founded Jupiter before even the crisis to create what we call like a hands-off grocery experience, all the way from the part of meal planning all the way to the delivery. So when you sign up to Jupiter today, it's like we have an algorithm that predicts like what your cart should be every week. So this works really well for people who are extremely busy, usually like dual income households with kids. Those are our primary customers today in the Bay Area. And usually as soon as they sign up, like we could take like how their grocery process from like hours per week all the way down to even like nothing or minutes. It depends on how much they want to modify their carts week to week.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're providing a way for families who are always busy, but now even more so. They're trying to be teachers. They're trying to do their own work in close quarters. We're trying to give some time back to them. It's really taking the internet and trying to upend the grocery business. And I'm curious, why hasn't the internet already upended the grocery business? It's already turned everything else upside down in the last few decades. What's different here?
Yeah, for sure. So if you think about like groceries, or if you think about retail as a comparison, is like you had Amazon who came in like say 15, 20 years ago, and like they've forced a lot of retail to close. But the grocery landscape, at least the infrastructure of it, hasn't really changed in the age of the internet. And I thought that was like really, really crazy. So like what's really happening is that people are still, even though a lot of customers use the internet, people are still going to the grocery store. And the reason they're doing that is because there's a certain amount of trust that comes with grocery. Grocery itself is like an experience. People go there to meet people in the community, as well as they go there to like essentially express themselves in terms of what they buy. And so it's not as easy as just like how clothes went online. Like people really have to like touch produce to feel the freshness, to smell the food that they're eating. And so it comes with a little bit more complexity in terms of automating that, or in terms of like bringing it online. And so like, that's why you see today, like in San Francisco, there's still 30 plus big grocery chains in San Francisco. But 30 plus individual grocery stores, but like that has not really changed since like the internet started. So I think over the course of the next 10 years, especially with COVID, you'll see those 30 grocery stores, this is my bet at least, will be consolidated down to a few big warehouses. And that's something that I think is coming in the next few years.
Okay, so that element of being at the grocery store in person, of touching the produce, that's been hard to replicate online. I'm seeing Donna in the stream give us a different version of this, saying that she's built an elevated garden and is growing her own fresh herbs and small vegetables to use in home cooking. So that's taking it even a step closer to home. You're not even going to the store, you're going out to your garden to see, is that tomato ripe and ready to go. I'm hearing you talk about trust. We've heard Lewis have notes of that too. You know, people are trusting him because his business has served some of the finest restaurants in New York. We're seeing him build community on the ground level. I want to know about community too. What opportunities are there for grocery delivery apps, for internet grocery, to build more of a sense of community? You have a lot of data that you're gathering. What can come from that can make people feel more connected to one another?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I think that hasn't gotten to the US yet, but it's definitely a thing in East Asia, is how do you create that community that you found in a grocery store? How do you create it online? And one of the things we're doing at Jupiter is we're making shopping a social experience where you could actually interact with the people and see what other people are buying. Another thing we're doing is we're allowing people to create like their recipes online. Not necessarily like the recipes itself, but they're essentially grouping products together in what would be used to make a recipe. And then we're allowing people to share that. And so online, this is our way of how we're going to build the same sense of community that you found in the grocery store. Because from our perspective, it's like you have to build an experience that is more delightful and more enjoyable than going to the physical grocery store. So for us, social is a huge part of that. And you haven't really seen that with any of the grocery apps today. Like most of them is just like taking the store and put it online with the same categories. Like nothing has really changed there. So we're tackling that with social shopping.
I'm thinking back to the conversation with Monica talking about project cooking. Midori says that she's been a project cook, learning to make many restaurant-style foods at home with varied cuisines. Most popular in her house are Italian and Mexican. Is that kind of what you're thinking? We've got people all over. You know what they're buying. You know what's going into it. Let's all come and cook something together. Let's make it a project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Like what we're thinking is, if you think at least like one like maybe like nerdy way of thinking about it, it's like there's 800,000 people in the city of San Francisco, and they're from all over the world. And what they're doing every single day is they're creating things and they're making things, and none of that data is accessible anywhere. So we think about Jupiter as potentially creating a food network in the near future, where it's like you could go on Jupiter and you could search for a low-calorie chicken tikka masala, or you could search for people who are like you, who are from a country like you, and see exactly what they make, and you'll be able to follow them. Similar to kind of like how you do on Pinterest a little bit. But on Jupiter, we see everything. Like we see people from all over the world. We see people are at different stages in life, different relative technology aptitude. And like one of the ways we're thinking about making the experience better is like, how do we get them to interact in a way where there's still a good amount of privacy maintained while making the experience like extremely delightful.
Yeah, I love hearing the notes of experience and community. I think that's definitely missing from the online grocery services I've seen. I think that would be really neat. I want to talk a little bit about COVID for a second. Talk to me some about the supply chain issues you faced when this happened. I'm curious, you're collecting all this data. Is there anything that you or other similar services could have done to anticipate it? And then going forward, is there anything that you think you can figure out in the future based on what's happened?
Yeah, for sure. So to answer the question of anticipation, I don't think I think the most sophisticated businesses that I've seen in San Francisco were hit by the crisis. I think one of the things we could have did to anticipate it better was to actually just like believe that what we saw in China was gonna eventually get to the US. I have like classmates that live in Shanghai, and a lot of them were telling me exactly what was happening. And we started like changing our business processes around about early March. And we were still a little bit too late, because what we saw in the crisis was we usually have fill rates about above 90%. And that dropped all the way down to 70%. So not only were the grocery stores out of supply, but the wholesalers were also out of supply. So what we started to do, at least on our side, was to reach out to people like Luis, who lost a lot of their restaurant business, and we started reallocating the supply to the consumer side of things. Going forward, I think as we've pushed towards efficiency, a lot of these supply chains are extremely efficient. And what you have with efficiency is systems that are very fragile. And so going forward, I think one thing we could think about in terms of how we structure supply chains is how to be more responsive, and how we could like reduce the connections from the consumer all the way back to the manufacturer. What we're trying to do is only have one connection in between. So we communicate directly to a manufacturer, and then we deliver to the consumer. And so from my perspective, I think the small amount of people in the middle, reducing that to like one or two, will make the supply chain more efficient and more responsive. But I think it'll take like many years before it could get to that. But that's our ultimate objective, is to one, have us in the middle and us talk directly to the manufacturer. So as soon as demand changes, we could flow that information to the manufacturer and we could respond a lot quicker.
Yeah, so we're seeing, we probably couldn't have anticipated this, that this it was out of nowhere, except maybe if you got kind of a word from people closer to it where it originated. But that maybe the answer forward is not that you're going to be able to anticipate it, but that if you tighten up your supply chains a little bit more, maybe you take out some of the risk that is present there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chad, thank you so much for joining us today. I think other businesses in the food industry and beyond are going to be really interested in learning what you're learning about supply chains, et cetera, and bringing this new service to consumers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to all for joining us today. We did hear from some project cooks. M. Wong said that I do recipes whenever I remember from memory. I'm a breakfast person. I think, M. Wong, you're probably saying you're pretty good at pouring a bowl of cereal there. But hey, it works. It feeds you. Morgan says, I'm glad people get to cook at home. It's fun, but it can be expensive. Morgan pointing out that in places with food deserts and low wages, most of your money is going toward a roof over your head. So an important thing to note there as well. Home cooking can be fun, but it also can still be a challenge for everyone. I'm so glad that you were able to join us on the show today. We are here 5 days a week from the LinkedIn news page at noon Eastern. Please tune in tomorrow when my colleague Caroline Fairchild will be talking to the CEO of Bonobos, Mickey Onveral, on retail's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.